South Africa is competing with many emerging and developing nations around the world for investment at the 54th World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. That's where we find Newzroom Afrika's Xolani Mbanjwa, who is our business editor. You're standing by to speak to the CEO of Standard Bank South Africa, and that would be Mr. Tshabalala, who knows, Xolani, about our competitive advantage.
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon here in Davos, Switzerland. That's the crux of why South Africa is here. The delegation and the delegations from around the world who are competing for the same money bags and investors to come to our shores and plow their money to grow the country's economy. And of course, as you said, I'm not alone. I'm with the Standard Bank Group CEO, Mr. Tshabalala. Thank you once again for coming through for the interview. The theme this year being rebuilding trust seems to be the World Economic Forum taking stock of the fragmentation that has taken place in the past couple of years around the world. We've seen protectionism coming through since 2020 when it comes to trade. What does the rebuilding trust theme mean to you in what you have experienced as a business leader?
Xolani, once again, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a great privilege to be talking to you and to your audience. The world after the Second World War was built around the United Nations Charter, the Security Council, the Bretton Woods institutions. Initially, people thinking of a multipolar world, which then became a bipolar world during the Cold War. Post the Cold War, you had a unipolar world. The world led by the United States. We're now entering an era of multipolar and competition between major powers. China, the United States. There's a question about whether or not we will end up with a Thucydides trap in the competition between the US and China. There are major wars happening in Ukraine and Russia. There is a major war happening in Gaza. In that context, people are focused on how do you build institutions, because trust is about strong institutions. How do you build the rule of law, whether it be domestic law or international law? How do you make sure that people meet their obligations as they fall due, whether it be between you and I in our contractual arrangement or between nations in the context of trade? Our view is that as an African-based institution headquartered in South Africa, in that context, we need to be explaining to people as they compete with us for capital, why should they be invested in South Africa? And our answer is simply this, that South Africa is open for business. We have an incredible national competitive advantage. It has several elements which I've spoken to you about in the past, and those competitive advantages generate returns that are superior to the risks that you take for being invested in South Africa. Yes, we've got our challenge in South Africa. There are many challenges, but we are confronting them. Whether we be members of organs of civil society, government, or business. Our country is open for business. We're hard at work and we're moving forward.
What is the risk, or what are the consequences of not properly dealing with the rebuilding that trust? And I guess I'm asking that if the fragmentation that currently exists and that has been created in the past couple of years continues, what kind of world can we expect if we don't deal with it in engagements such as the World Economic Forum?
So again, you know me well, Xolani. I have a glass half full view of the world rather than a glass half empty. The world will recalibrate. The world will apply its mind to international fora, multilateral agencies, the role of the United Nations, the role of the World Bank, and it will adapt to this multipolar environment. I've got no doubt about that. The Global South will have more say at the United Nations. It will have more say in the Security Council. It will have more say in the international trade organizations. And we will be fine, in my view. The real winners are going to be those that identify the opportunities that drive growth in that context, whether that be individuals, yourself, organizations, the organization you work for, countries, South Africa, the African continent, or the Global South in general. So it's going to be about identifying those opportunities that will help you generate prosperity for the people that you're responsible to.
Let's talk about the agenda for you. What's important here for you at WEF 2024? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to, and I've been doing it together with other South African leaders, it's to remind people that South Africa is the gateway to the African continent. If you want to be competing, acquiring assets or competing on the continent, your entry point is South Africa. Secondly, we have got incredibly powerful institutions, the Department of Science and Technology, the innovations that we've led as South Africa, for example, on COVID. Just the great work that was done by our scientists is of a global standard. We've got a transparent budget formulation and budget execution in our country. We're ranked second in the world for budget transparency. So we criticize one another, but we ought to remind one another of the good things that we do. Budget transparency is one of them. Addressing the structural reforms that we need to improve the GDP of the country so that we have got a larger pie that will be enjoyed by more South Africans. And so the focus on energy, the focus on transportation and logistics, the focus on crime and corruption, the focus on the other network industries that are necessary to produce better outcomes for South Africans. And then it is positioning South Africa in the global debates about the role of South Africa, Africa, and the global South. So, what are people going to be saying and doing in the space of climate change? How do we adapt to our environment in a way that is in our best interest? You and I were speaking about the floods in KZN that are currently happening. What we need in South Africa is the ability to adapt to this environment, implementing a town planning that is consistent with world best practice, putting in place stormwater drainage systems that work, making sure people don't build homes and houses beyond particular flood lines, and thereby doing good and creating prosperity for our people in that process. Explaining to people the imperative need for us as Africans to be compensated for the fact that Africa is a carbon sink and the world owes us. And we should not be apologetic about the fact that they owe us. We should be insisting that we produce minerals, rare earth minerals that are necessary for the climate transition. Well, how about Europe moving production capacity to Africa or to South Africa, where we can beneficiate, produce goods, and then sell them? That will have the impact of reducing carbon emissions globally. And these are demands we should be putting forward. We have the right also as Africans to use our endowments. And use those endowments in a way that benefits and reduces poverty and thereby reduces carbon emissions. We need to be talking about innovation, artificial intelligence. How does that improve the lives of South Africans and Africans? How do we build the networks necessary for people to have access to these networks in a way that benefits us as Africans? And so that's sort of the agenda, putting South Africa front and center in discussions, putting the continent front and center, and then putting the global South front and center.
Very powerful message indeed. Last year you were quoted in October as saying that you believe that load shedding could be dealt with within the next 18 months. Do you still hold that view, and was that an accurate report of what you observed or what you actually said?
Well, it is not given to a banker to foresee the mysteries of the future. All we can do is analyze the data that's available to us and make decisions based on that data. So what's the data? As we speak, the energy and availability factor as at the fourth quarter of last year was 56%. In 2000, it was 65%. The target in the long term is 75%. And as I say, in 2020, it was 65%. Actions necessary to get us to that high energy and availability factor: Kusile on stream, Kusile 5 on stream, Kusile 6 is under construction. There is lots of maintenance happening. There's lots of fixing of the generation and the transmission capability of Eskom. The organization of Eskom is being restructured to cope with generation, transmission and distribution. All of these things are calculated to increase the energy availability factor of the country. There have been legal reforms to make it possible for distributed power to happen. There is currently, as a result of those reforms, 10,000 megawatts under construction in our country. Of that 10,000, roughly 3,000 will come on stream by 2025. That's 3 stages of load shedding. So all of those factors tell you that as long as our partners and our businesses and us as individuals do the right things, we will reduce the levels of blackouts in our country. I must close by saying that notwithstanding all of what I've said, the Ministry of Minerals and Energy has said, though, that we will not have uninterrupted power in our country until 2030. But all the actions that we are taking reduce the risks that we face arising from blackouts and load shedding.
Mr. Tshabalala, thank you very much for your time. I wish we had more time here in Davos.
I so wish we could.
Yes, here in Davos, Switzerland. And of course, I wanted to chat to him about what Standard Bank has announced here in South Africa this week, where they will be empowering the youth in a new program called Virtualized Experienced Programs, which is about empowering the youth in the world of online and other tech spaces. But back to you in studio here in Davos, Switzerland, Dudu.
Thank you very much. Xolani Mbanjwa, Newzroom Afrika's business editor.